The September air in Phoenix carried that familiar dry heat that always reminded me of childhood summers spent by my grandmother's pool. I was sitting on the worn leather couch in my mother's living room, the same one where we'd watched countless movies together when I was growing up. The afternoon sun streamed through the sheer curtains, casting dancing shadows across the hardwood floors that my mother, Carmen, had refinished herself after my father left 3 years ago. I had driven over from my apartment in Scottsdale after receiving an unusual text from her. "Jess, can you come over tonight? There's something important I need to tell you." At 28, I thought I knew everything about my mother. Carmen Martinez had always been my rock, the woman who worked double shifts as a nurse to put me through college, who never missed a single one of my soccer games despite her exhaustion, who taught me that love meant sacrifice and dedication. Paced nervously around the kitchen, her graying hair pulled back in the same ponytail she'd worn for as long as I could remember. Her hands trembled slightly as she poured 2 glasses of her homemade horchata, a recipe passed down from my great-grandmother. The familiar cinnamon scent should have been comforting, but something in the air felt electric, charged with anticipation and fear. "Mija," she began, using the pet name that had soothed my childhood fears and celebrated my victories. Her voice carried that slight accent that became more pronounced when she was emotional. "You know how much I love you, right? How you're the most important thing in my world?" I nodded, studying her face. The worry lines around her brown eyes seemed deeper today, and she kept glancing toward the front door as if expecting someone. My mother had always been direct, never one to dance around difficult conversations. When she told me about the divorce, she'd been straightforward and honest. This hesitation was completely unlike her. "Mom, you're scaring me. What's going on?" I reached across the small dining table we'd bought together at a garage sale when I was 16, covering her weathered hand with mine. Her skin felt cold despite the Arizona heat. She took a deep breath, the kind that seems to come from somewhere deep in your soul. "I've been seeing someone, Jessica, for about 8 months now." She paused, watching my reaction carefully. "Her name is Elena." The word "her" hung in the air like a revelation that shifted everything I thought I knew about my family, about my mother, about the woman who had raised me with such traditional values rooted in our Mexican heritage. I felt my eyebrows raise involuntarily, processing this information that seemed to rewrite decades of assumptions. "Her?" I repeated, not with judgment, but with genuine surprise. My mother had dated a few men since the divorce, awkward dinner, introductions that never seemed to go anywhere. She'd always spoken about finding a good man to settle down with eventually. Carmen nodded, tears beginning to well in her eyes. "I know this is unexpected, Mija. I never imagined that at 53, I would discover something so fundamental about myself. But Elena, she makes me feel alive in ways I never knew were possible." Before I could respond, the doorbell rang with its familiar 2-tone chime. My mother's face transformed, a nervous excitement replacing the worry. "That's her," she whispered, standing up and smoothing her favorite burgundy blouse. "I asked her to come over because I wanted you both to meet properly." As she walked toward the front door, I remained seated, my mind racing through 1,000 questions and emotions. The sound of voices drifted from the entryway, my mother's familiar cadence mixing with another woman's voice, softer and carrying what sounded like a slight southern drawl. When they entered the living room together, I felt something shift inside my chest, like a door opening that I never knew existed. Elena was nothing like what I had imagined. She was probably in her early 40s, with shoulder-length auburn hair that caught the light streaming through the windows. Her smile was warm and genuine, reaching eyes that were the most striking shade of green I'd ever seen. She wore a simple white sundress that somehow looked elegant and effortless at the same time. "Jessica, this is Elena," my mother said, her voice filled with a pride and happiness I hadn't heard in years. "Elena, this is my daughter, the one I'm always talking about. Elena stepped forward with natural grace, extending her hand. It's so wonderful to finally meet you, Jessica. Your mother talks about you constantly. I feel like I already know you. Her voice was melodic, with that gentle southern accent I'd detected from the kitchen. When our hands touched, I felt an unexpected jolt of electricity run up my arm. Her skin was soft and warm, and she held my gaze a moment longer than necessary. There was something in her eyes, a spark of recognition, perhaps, or curiosity. I found myself momentarily speechless, which was unusual for me. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The pleasure is mine, I finally managed, suddenly very aware of how my voice sounded, how I was standing, how the afternoon light was falling across Elena's face in a way that made her seem almost luminous. My mother, oblivious to the strange moment that had passed between Elena and me, gestured toward the couch. Please, sit down. I'll get us some more drinks. Her happiness was palpable, radiating from her like warmth from a fireplace on a cold night. As Elena settled onto the couch, choosing the spot closest to where I had been sitting, I caught a hint of her perfume, something light and floral, with notes of jasmine. She crossed her legs elegantly and turned her full attention to me, as if I were the most interesting person in the room. Your mother tells me you're a graphic designer, she said, her green eyes sparkling with genuine interest. That must be such a creative and fulfilling career. I found myself drawn into conversation with her, discovering that she was an art teacher at a local high school, recently moved to Phoenix from Georgia after a difficult divorce. She spoke passionately about her students, about the transformative power of art, about finding beauty in unexpected places. There was an intelligence in her eyes, and a warmth in her smile that made me want to keep talking to her, to learn more about her thoughts and dreams and experiences. My mother returned with drinks, settling into her favorite armchair with a contentment I hadn't seen since before my parents' marriage began to crumble. She watched Elena and me talking with such joy that it was impossible not to feel happy for her, even as something complex and confusing began stirring in my own heart. As the evening progressed, I found myself stealing glances at Elena when she wasn't looking, noticing the way she threw her head back when she laughed, how she gestured expressively with her hands when telling stories, how she looked at my mother with such genuine affection and respect. There was something magnetic about her presence, something that made the ordinary living room feel charged with possibility and danger. 3 weeks had passed since that initial meeting, and Elena had become a regular presence in our family dynamic. She would join us for Sunday dinners at my mother's house, where we'd gather around the same wooden table where I'd done homework as a child. The autumn Phoenix evenings were finally cooling down, allowing us to eat on the back patio surrounded by my mother's carefully tended garden of desert roses and prickly pear cacti. Found myself looking forward to these dinners with an anticipation that I couldn't quite explain or didn't want to examine too closely. Elena would arrive with homemade cornbread or a bottle of wine, always contributing something that made the evening feel special. She had a gift for making people feel seen and valued, asking thoughtful questions about my work projects, and remembering details from previous conversations. During our third dinner together, Elena mentioned that she was struggling to set up her new art studio in her rental house. I'm absolutely hopeless with anything technical, she laughed, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. The lighting system is beyond me, and don't even get me started on organizing the space efficiently. Jessica is wonderful with that sort of thing, my mother immediately offered, beaming with pride. She redesigned her entire apartment last year, and it looks like something from a magazine. I felt my cheeks warm under Elena's interested gaze. I'd be happy to help, I offered, trying to keep my voice casual, even as my heart rate quickened at the prospect of spending time alone with her. I love space planning and design challenges. Elena's face lit up with genuine gratitude. Would you really? That would be incredible. I could cook for you as payment. I make a mean shrimp and grits. The following Saturday afternoon, I found myself standing in Elena's doorway, toolkit in hand, and trying to ignore the way my pulse quickened when she opened the door. She was wearing paint-splattered jeans and an old college t-shirt that somehow looked effortlessly beautiful on her. Her hair was pulled up in a messy bun with a pencil stuck through it, and there was a small smudge of blue paint on her cheek. "You're a lifesaver," she said, stepping aside to let me in. Her house was a small adobe-style rental in an older neighborhood, with high ceilings and large windows that let in gorgeous natural light. The walls were already decorated with her artwork, stunning landscape paintings that captured the desert's beauty in ways I'd never noticed before. "These are incredible," I said, stopping in front of a painting of a sunset over the superstition. Mountains. The way she'd captured the light was almost magical, making the ordinary landscape seem otherworldly. "Thank you," she said softly, coming to stand beside me. "I painted that one during my first week here. Arizona sunsets are unlike anything I ever saw in Georgia." She was close enough that I could smell her perfume again, that same jasmine scent that had been haunting my dreams. We worked together for the next 4 hours, installing track lighting and organizing her art supplies. Elena was easy to work with, following my instructions while sharing stories about her teaching experiences and her students. She had this way of making everything feel like an adventure, even the mundane task of sorting paintbrushes by size. "You know," she said during a break, as we sat on her back porch sharing iced tea, "your mother talks about you constantly, but I don't think she fully captures how remarkable you are." I felt heat rise in my cheeks. "She's biased. All mothers think their children are remarkable." Elena shook her head, her green eyes serious. "No, it's more than that. You have this way of seeing things, of solving problems creatively, and you're so kind and generous with your time." She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "I can see where you get it from. Your mother is one of the most generous souls I've ever met." Something in her tone when she spoke about my mother made my chest tighten with an emotion I couldn't name. It should have made me happy to hear Elena speak so fondly of her, and part of me was. But another part, a part I was trying desperately to ignore, felt something that might have been jealousy. "She's been so much happier since she met you," I said, forcing myself to focus on my mother's well-being rather than the confusing emotions swirling inside me. "I haven't seen her this content in years." Elena smiled, but there was something almost sad in her expression. "She's an extraordinary woman. I feel so lucky that she chose to trust me with her heart." She looked out at the desert landscape, her profile highlighted by the late afternoon sun. "After my divorce, I never thought I'd find love again, especially not with a woman. But Carmen, she makes me believe in second chances." The way she said my mother's name, with such tenderness and reverence, should have warmed my heart. Instead, it made me feel hollow and confused. I was happy for my mother. Truly I was. She deserved love and companionship after the difficult years following her divorce. But sitting there with Elena, watching the way the light played across her features, I was forced to confront a truth I'd been avoiding. I was attracted to her. Not just attracted. I was developing feelings that were completely inappropriate and potentially devastating to my family. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in those brilliant oranges and purples that Elena had captured so beautifully, in her painting, she turned to me with an expression that seemed to see right through my carefully maintained composure. "Jessica," she said quietly, "can I ask you something?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Have you ever felt something that you knew was wrong, but that felt so right you couldn't ignore it?" My heart stopped. The question hung in the air between us, loaded with implication and possibility. I searched her face, looking for clarification, for some sign of what she meant. Her green eyes held mine with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. I started, then stopped, unsure of how to answer without revealing too much. I think everyone has moments like that. She nodded slowly, as if my non-answer was answer enough. It's a terrible feeling, isn't it? Wanting something you can't have, shouldn't have. The conversation felt dangerous, like we were standing at the edge of a cliff and one wrong word would send us tumbling into something we couldn't come back from. I stood up abruptly, needing distance and air and time to think. I should go, I said, gathering my tools with hands that shook slightly. The lighting is all set up, and you should be able to work in there comfortably now. Elena stood as well, following me to the front door. As I reached for the handle, she placed her hand on my arm, stopping me. The contact sent electricity shooting through my entire body. "Jessica," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you. For everything." I turned to look at her, and for a moment, time seemed suspended. She was so close I could count the flecks of gold in her green eyes, could see the faint freckles across her nose. There was something in her expression that mirrored what I was feeling. Confusion, desire, fear, and longing all mixed together. For one heart-stopping moment, I thought she might kiss me. For one terrifying moment, I wanted her to. Instead, she stepped back, breaking the spell. "Drive safely," she said, her voice carefully neutral. I nodded and fled to my car, my hands shaking as I started the engine. As I drove home through the darkening desert, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted between us, something that would be impossible to ignore or undo. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our interaction, every word, every look. I was falling for my mother's girlfriend, and there was absolutely nothing I could do to stop it. The following weeks became a careful dance of stolen moments and unspoken understanding. Elena had started stopping by my apartment occasionally, always with a reasonable excuse. She needed advice on framing her paintings for a local gallery showing, or she wanted to borrow a book I'd mentioned, or she was in the neighborhood and thought she'd check on me after I'd mentioned feeling stressed about a demanding client. Each visit felt like a small betrayal and a precious gift at the same time. We would sit in my living room, surrounded by my own artwork and design projects, talking for hours about everything and nothing. Elena had this way of listening that made me feel like the most interesting person in the world. She would curl, up in my favorite chair, usually wearing one of her flowing sundresses, and give me her complete attention as I talked about my work, my dreams, my fears about the future. "You have such a unique perspective on color," she said during one of these visits, studying a series of digital designs I'd been working on for a local restaurant's rebrand. It was early November now, and Phoenix was finally experiencing what passed for autumn in the desert. The windows were open, letting in the cooler air that carried the scent of desert sage. "You think so?" I asked, moving to stand beside her as she examined my work on the computer screen. She smelled like jasmine and something else, maybe vanilla or sandalwood. Being close to her had become both easier and more difficult over the past month. "Definitely. Look at this palette you chose," she said, pointing to a design featuring deep teals and warm corals. "Most people would never think to pair these colors, but they're absolutely perfect together. They complement each other in this unexpected way." Her words seemed to carry more weight than just artistic criticism. When she looked up at me, her green eyes searching my face, I felt that familiar electric current run between us. We were standing so close that I could see the tiny lines around her eyes, could watch the way her lips parted slightly as if she wanted to say something more. "Elena," I whispered, not sure what I wanted to say but needing to fill the charged silence. She stepped back quickly, as if suddenly remembering herself. "I should go," she said, gathering her purse with hands that weren't quite steady. "Your mother is making dinner tonight, and I promised I'd help with the cooking." The mention of my mother was like cold water thrown over both of us. The guilt that had been my constant companion for weeks crashed over me again, reminding me of how wrong this all was. Elena was dating my mother. My mother was happier than I'd seen her in years. what I was feeling, what we both seemed to be. Feeling was selfish and destructive. But as Elena headed toward the door, she paused and turned back to me. "Jessica, I need you to know, spending time with you, getting to know you, it means more to me than you realize. She seemed to struggle for words, then shook her head. "Just know that you're important to me." After she left, I sat in my living room for a long time, staring at the designs she'd been admiring and trying to make sense of the mess my life was becoming. I loved my mother fiercely, respected her, wanted nothing but happiness for her. But I was also falling deeper in love with Elena with each passing day, and I didn't know how to stop it. The situation became even more complicated when my mother asked me to help plan a surprise birthday party for Elena's 42nd birthday in mid-November. "I want it to be perfect, mija," my mother said, her eyes bright with excitement as we planned the details over coffee at our favorite cafe in Old Town Scottsdale. She mentioned once that she never had a proper birthday party as a child, so I want to give her something really special. I threw myself into the planning with an enthusiasm that probably seemed excessive to my mother, but felt necessary to me. If I couldn't have Elena, at least I could help create a moment of pure joy for her. I designed custom invitations, researched caterers, found the perfect venue, a small art gallery that would showcase Elena's paintings as part of the celebration. The day of the party arrived with unusually cool weather for Phoenix, the kind of crisp November day that makes you remember why people fall in love with the desert. The gallery was filled with Elena's artwork, each piece professionally lit and labeled. I had spent hours the day before helping to hang them, and seeing her work displayed so beautifully made my heart swell with pride. Elena arrived with my mother, wearing a midnight blue dress that made her green eyes even more striking. When she saw the gallery filled with friends, colleagues, and her artwork, tears immediately sprang to her eyes. "Carmen, I can't believe you did all this," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. My mother beamed, pulling Elena close for a kiss that made my chest tighten with complicated feelings. "Jessica helped with everything," my mother said generously. "She designed the invitations, found this venue, organized all the details. I couldn't have done any of it without her." Elena turned to look at me across the crowded gallery, and the gratitude in her eyes was almost overwhelming. "Thank you," she mouthed, and I nodded, unable to trust my voice. Throughout the evening, I watched Elena move through the crowd, graciously accepting congratulations on her artwork and birthday wishes from the guests. She was radiant, genuinely happy in a way that made her even more beautiful. Several times our eyes met across the room, and each time, I felt that familiar jolt of connection that seemed to exist independent of everyone else around us. Near the end of the evening, as guests began to leave and my mother was busy saying goodbye to friends, Elena approached me by one of her landscape paintings, the sunset over the Superstition Mountains that I had admired in her home. "I can't thank you enough for all of this," she said quietly. "This is the most beautiful birthday I've ever had. You deserve it," I replied, meaning it completely. "Your work is incredible, and you make my mother so happy." She was quiet for a moment, studying the painting rather than looking at me. "Jessica, can I tell you something?" I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I was prepared for whatever she might say. "When I painted this," she said, gesturing to the sunset landscape, "I was thinking about new beginnings, about finding beauty in unexpected places. But now, when I look at it, I think about how some of the most beautiful things in life are also the most complicated." I knew she wasn't just talking about the painting. "Elena, I know," she said softly, finally turning to meet my eyes. "I know this is impossible and wrong and complicated beyond belief, but I also know that what I feel when I'm with you is more real than anything I've experienced in a very long time." Before I could respond, my mother appeared beside us, slightly tipsy from the wine and glowing with happiness. Are you two admiring Elena's masterpiece? She asked, wrapping an arm around Elena's waist possessively. Isn't she talented, mija? Incredibly talented, I managed, the words feeling thick in my throat as I watched my mother nuzzle Elena's neck affectionately. Elena's eyes never left mine, and in them I saw the same turmoil I was feeling: desire, guilt, longing, and an love that neither of us had asked for, but couldn't seem to escape. December in Phoenix brought cooler evenings and the kind of clear, star-filled skies that made the desert feel infinite and magical. My mother had decided to host a small Christmas party, wanting to introduce Elena to extended family members who lived scattered across the valley. Aunts, uncles, and cousins I hadn't seen since last year's holidays would be gathering at the house where I'd grown up, bringing with them all the traditions and expectations of our close-knit Mexican-American family. I'm nervous, Elena confessed to me during one of our increasingly frequent coffee meetings. We had developed a routine over the past month, meeting at a small cafe in central Phoenix every Tuesday morning, ostensibly so Elena could get advice about navigating relationships within our family structure, but really because neither of us could seem to stay away from each other. She sat across from me in a corner booth, wrapped in a cream-colored sweater that made her auburn hair look like it was touched with fire. Her hands curved around her coffee mug, as if seeking warmth. Though the December morning was mild by most standards. They're going to love you, I assured her, though I understood her anxiety. My extended family could be overwhelming in their enthusiasm and curiosity. Just be yourself, and be prepared for a lot of questions about your intentions with my mother. Elena laughed, but there was tension in the sound. Your mother means everything to me, Jessica. I hope they can see that. The way she said it made my heart clench. Over the past few weeks, our conversations had grown more intimate, more charged with unspoken feelings. But she always managed to circle back to her love for my mother. It was like a reminder to both of us about the lines we couldn't cross. They will, I said, reaching across the table to briefly touch her hand. The contact sent the familiar jolt of electricity through me, and I saw her breath catch slightly. But Elena, what about what you want? Are you happy? It was a dangerous question, one that I probably shouldn't have asked, but the words slipped out before I could stop them, propelled by weeks of watching her navigate between the woman she was with my mother and the woman she became when we were alone together. Elena's green eyes searched my face. What kind of question? Is that? An honest one, I replied, not backing down despite the voice in my head screaming warnings. You can love someone and still not be completely fulfilled by them. You can care deeply for someone and still feel like something is missing. She set down her coffee mug with hands that shook slightly. Jessica, what are you asking me? I'm asking if you ever wonder what it would be like if we had met under different circumstances, I said quietly, my heart pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. If there wasn't this impossible situation between us. For a long moment, Elena didn't respond. The cafe bustled around us with holiday shoppers and business meetings, but our corner felt suspended in time and silence. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Every day, she admitted. I wonder about it every single day. The confession hung between us like a bridge that once crossed, we could never return from. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, whether from relief or despair, I couldn't tell. Elena, but it doesn't matter what I wonder about, she continued, her voice growing stronger. It doesn't matter what either of us feels because this situation is what it is. Your mother loves me, and I love her. She's given me a home, a family, a sense of belonging that I never thought I'd have again. I won't destroy that. I can't. I nodded, understanding completely while simultaneously feeling like my heart was being torn in half. I know. I would never ask you to, but being around you, spending time with you, it's becoming impossible, she said, tears now visible in her eyes. The way you make me feel, it's not fair to any of us. So what do we do? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. I think we need to step back, she said, though everything about her body language suggested it was the last thing she wanted. These coffee meetings, the visits to your apartment, the long conversations, they're not helping either of us move past this. The Christmas party was scheduled for the following Saturday, and I spent the week in a state of anxious anticipation mixed with dread. Elena and I had agreed to maintain appropriate distance, to focus on the family celebration and my mother's happiness. But the thought of watching them together, of playing the role of the supportive daughter while my heart ached with impossible longing, felt almost unbearable. The day of the party arrived with unusually cool weather that actually required sweaters, a rarity in Phoenix that put everyone in a festive mood. My mother's house was decorated with a combination of traditional Mexican Christmas ornaments and Elena's artistic touches. Papel picado fluttered from the ceiling alongside strings of white lights, and the scent of tamales and pozole filled the air. Elena arrived with my mother in the late afternoon, wearing a deep red dress that was both elegant and appropriate for meeting traditional family members. She carried a homemade flan, my great-aunt Rosa's recipe that my mother had taught her, and her nervousness was evident in the way she kept smoothing her hair and adjusting her dress. "You look beautiful, mija," my mother told her, using the same endearment she'd always reserved for me. The casual intimacy of it hit me like a physical blow. The evening progressed as most family gatherings do, with too much food, too many stories told and retold, and the comfortable chaos of multiple conversations happening simultaneously. Elena navigated it all with grace, charming my relatives with her genuine interest in their stories and her thoughtful questions about family traditions. I watched from across the room as my Aunt Carmen, my mother's older sister and family, matriarch, pulled Elena aside for what I knew would be the official interrogation. Tia Carmen had strong opinions about family loyalty and had been skeptical about my mother's relationship with a woman, though she'd kept her concerns mostly to herself out of respect for my mother's happiness. "So, Elena," I heard her say in her direct way, "what are your intentions with our Carmen?" Elena's response was immediate and heartfelt. "I love her with everything I have," she said simply. "She's given me a second chance at happiness, and I don't take that lightly. I want to build a life with her, to be the partner she deserves." My mother beamed from across the kitchen, and several of my relatives nodded approvingly. Elena had passed the test with flying colors, and I felt a confusing mixture of pride and heartbreak, watching her integrate so seamlessly into my family. Later in the evening, as the party began to wind down and relatives started gathering their coats and leftover food, I found myself alone with Elena on the back patio. The desert night was clear and cold, with stars visible despite the city lights. We stood at opposite ends of the small space, both of us needing air, but maintaining the distance we'd promised each other. "You were perfect tonight," I told her, meaning it completely. "My family adores you. They're wonderful people," she replied, wrapping her arms around herself against the chill. "I can see where you get your warmth and generosity." "Elena," I said, the words coming out before I could stop them, "I need you to know something." She looked at me warily. "Jessica, we agreed." "I know what we agreed," I interrupted. "But I need to say this, just once, and then I'll never say it again." I took a deep breath, gathering courage for what might be the most important words I'd ever spoken. "I'm in love with you. Completely, irrevocably, impossibly in love with you. And I know it's wrong, and I know it's complicated, and I know it can never happen. But you deserve to know that someone sees you, all of you, and loves every part of what they see." Elena's face crumpled, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. "Jessica, please don't." "I'm not asking for anything," I said, quickly. "I'm not asking you to leave my mother or change anything about your life. I just needed you to know that you are loved, deeply and completely, by someone who sees exactly who you are." Before she could respond, the patio door slid open, and my mother stepped outside, looking between the two of us with concern. "What's wrong?" "Elena, mija, why are you crying?" Elena quickly wiped her tears, forcing a smile. "Just overwhelmed by how welcoming everyone has been," she said. Which wasn't entirely untrue. "Your family is incredible, Carmen." My mother relaxed, pulling Elena close and kissing the top of her head. "They love you almost as much as I do," she said softly. "Almost." As they embraced, Elena's eyes met mine over my mother's shoulder. In them, I saw love, regret, longing, and goodbye all mixed together. I knew that whatever fragile connection we'd built over the past few months was ending tonight. She had made her choice, and it was the right choice, even if it was breaking both our hearts. 3 months had passed since the Christmas party, and spring was beginning to assert itself in Phoenix with longer days and the first tentative blooms on the desert trees. I had kept my promise to maintain distance from Elena, limiting our interactions to necessary family gatherings and polite but brief conversations. It was one of the most difficult things I'd ever done, but I could see that it was working for everyone involved. My mother seemed more relaxed and happy than ever. Without the subtle tension that had been building between Elena and me, she was able to fully enjoy her relationship without the nagging sense that something was amiss. Elena had moved in with her in February, and they had settled into a comfortable, domestic routine that brought out the best in both of them. I had thrown myself into my work, taking on more challenging projects and even considering starting my own design firm. The creative energy that had been tied up in impossible longing was redirecting itself into professional ambition and personal growth. I had also started dating again. Nothing serious, but enough to remind myself that there were other people in the world capable of capturing my interest. The crisis came on a sunny Saturday in March when my mother called me in tears. "Mija, I need you to come over right away," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Elena is in the hospital." I drove to the hospital with my heart in my throat, terrified of what I might find. My mother met me in the waiting room of the cardiac unit, her face streaked with tears and her usual composure completely shattered. "She had a heart attack," she explained through her sobs. "A mild one, they say. But Jessica, I was so scared. I thought I was going to lose her." I held my mother as she cried, offering what comfort I could while processing my own fear and grief. The thought of Elena being hurt, of potentially losing her forever, was almost unbearable despite all my efforts to distance myself emotionally. "Can I see her?" I asked when my mother had calmed down slightly. She nodded. "She's been asking for you. Room 314. Elena looked small and fragile in the hospital bed, connected to monitors and IV lines that seemed to emphasize how vulnerable we all were. Her auburn hair was spread across the white pillow, and her face was pale but alert. When she saw me enter the room, her eyes filled with tears. "Jessica," she said softly, reaching out her hand. I took it without hesitation, no longer caring about maintaining appropriate distance. This was bigger than our complicated feelings. This was about love and family and the possibility of loss that puts everything else in perspective. "How are you feeling?" I asked, settling into the chair beside her bed. "Scared," she admitted, "and grateful, and like I've been given a second chance to get things right." "What do you mean?" Elena was quiet for a moment, staring at our joined hands. "Jessica, these past few months of trying to stay away from you, it's been torture. Not because I wanted to pursue something inappropriate, but because I realized I was trying to cut myself off from someone who had become incredibly important to me." I felt my breath catch. "Elena, let me finish," she said gently. "What I feel for you, it's not just attraction or infatuation. It's deeper than that. You're like the sister I never had, the friend I always wished for, the person who sees me most clearly. When I thought I might die today, one of my biggest regrets was that I had pushed away someone so precious because I was scared of my own feelings. I felt tears streaming down my face as I understood what she was trying to say. I felt the same way. When my mother called, I realized that I'd rather have you in my life as family, as a friend, than not have you at all. I love your mother, Jessica. I love her deeply and completely, and I want to spend my life with her. But I also love you, in a different way. As a daughter, as a friend, as someone who has become essential to who I am. I don't want to lose either of those relationships because I was too scared to figure out how to make them both work. I squeezed her hand gently, feeling a weight I'd been carrying for months finally beginning to lift. I love you too, Elena. And I love seeing how happy you make my mother. I think I confused different types of love, and that confusion made everything more complicated than it needed to be. Can we start over? She asked, her green eyes hopeful. Can we figure out how to be family without all the guilt and confusion? Before I could answer, my mother appeared in the doorway, carrying coffee and looking exhausted but relieved. The doctor says you can come home tomorrow, she told Elena, then noticed our joined hands and the tears on both our faces. What's wrong? Are you in pain? No, mi amor, Elena said, using the endearment that made my mother's face light up. Jessica and I were just talking about how much we love you and each other as family. My mother's eyes filled with fresh tears, but these were tears of joy. Ay, Dios mío, you two are going to make me cry again. She came over to the bed and wrapped both of us in an awkward but heartfelt three-way hug. My two favorite people in the world, getting along and loving each other. This is all I've ever wanted. Over the following weeks, as Elena recovered from her heart attack and we all adjusted to this new understanding, I discovered what it meant to truly have a chosen family. Elena wasn't my mother's girlfriend, who I had complicated feelings about. She was my bonus mom, my friend, my artistic mentor, and sometimes my partner in gently teasing my mother about her tendency to worry too much. We fell into new rhythms that honored all our relationships. Sunday dinners became a sacred tradition, where the three of us would cook together, Elena teaching me techniques she'd learned from her grandmother, while my mother shared stories from her nursing shifts. Elena and I resumed our Tuesday coffee meetings, but now they were filled with discussions about her art, my business plans, and our shared concern for my mother's well-being. In May, Elena had her first solo show at a gallery in Scottsdale, and I was her unofficial marketing coordinator, designing the promotional materials and helping coordinate the opening night reception. Watching her work displayed professionally, seeing the pride and joy on my mother's face as she talked about her partner, the artist, I felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with romantic love and everything to do with being part of something beautiful and meaningful. You know, Elena said to me during the opening reception, as we watched my mother charming potential buyers with stories about Elena's creative process, I think this worked out exactly as it was supposed to. What do you mean? I asked, though I thought I knew. I mean, I fell in love with your mother, which brought me into your family. But I also got to fall in love with you, in a different way, which gave me a daughter and a best friend. Some people spend their whole lives looking for one true love. I got lucky enough to find two different kinds of true love with two incredible women who happened to be related. I watched my mother across the room, saw how she glowed with happiness as she talked about Elena's work, how she looked over at us periodically with such contentment in her eyes. This was what healthy love looked like. Not possessive or jealous, but expansive and generous. I have something to tell you both, I said later that evening, as we sat on my mother's back patio sharing a bottle of champagne to celebrate Elena's successful show. They both looked at me expectantly. I've been seeing someone, I said, smiling at their immediate excitement. Her name is Maria. She's a teacher at the same school where Elena works. And I think you're both going to love her." My mother immediately launched into 1,000 questions, while Elena grinned and raised her champagne glass in a toast. "To second chances," she said. "To chosen family, and to love in all its beautiful, complicated forms." As we clinked glasses under the desert stars, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. I had thought I was falling in love with Elena, but what I had really been discovering was how to love more expansively, more generously, more bravely than I ever had before. The feelings I'd experienced weren't wrong. They were just a different kind of love than I had understood at the time. 6 months later, when Elena and my mother got married in a small ceremony in my mother's backyard, I stood beside them as Elena's maid of honor. As I watched them exchange vows under an arch decorated with Elena's paintings and my mother's roses, I felt nothing but joy and gratitude. Elena had kept her promise. She had figured out how to love us both, and in doing so, she had taught me that the heart is capable of expanding infinitely when we let it. Maria was there too, sitting in the front row and beaming at me in my bridesmaid dress. After the ceremony, as I danced with her while Elena and my mother swayed together nearby, she leaned close to my ear. "Your family is amazing," she whispered. "I can see where you get your capacity for love." I looked around at the celebration, at my extended family mingling with Elena's colleagues, at my mother laughing with pure joy, at Elena catching my eye and winking at me from across the dance floor, and realized that what had started as an impossible situation had transformed into something beautiful and sustainable. Sometimes the heart wants what it can't have, and sometimes learning to love differently, more appropriately, more generously, leads to something even better than what we originally thought we wanted. Elena had become exactly what she said she was: my bonus mom, my mentor, my friend, and one of the most important people in my world. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.